Captain Sarah Chen sat in her command chair aboard the UES Retribution, watching the stars drift past through the main viewport. The ship was 3 weeks into a routine patrol of the Outer Rim territories, checking for pirate activity and ensuring trade routes remained safe. Her crew of 200 Marines and naval personnel had seen action in the Centauri conflict just 6 months ago, and most were glad for the quiet assignment. The peace shattered when Communications Officer Riley Martinez suddenly straightened at his station. "Captain, I'm picking up a distress signal on the emergency frequency." Chen turned toward him, her dark eyes sharp. "Put it through." Static filled the bridge, followed by a voice speaking in heavily accented Standard Galactic. The translator worked to convert the alien speech into English, but the desperation in the caller's voice needed no translation. "This is Elder Healer Nithara of the medical vessel Healing Dawn. We are under attack by Vrkari raiders. They have boarded our ship. We have no weapons, no military protection. Please, anyone who receives this message, we have 400 souls aboard, including 130 younglings. The raiders are taking prisoners. We cannot fight them. Please help us." The transmission cut to static, then resumed with coordinates and a timestamp. Chen felt her blood chill as she read the numbers. The message was 3 days old. Lieutenant Marcus Torres, her second-in-command, stepped beside her chair. "Captain, those coordinates put them in the Kepler Nebula, about 18 hours at maximum burn." Chen knew about the Kythera. Everyone in human space did. They were one of the most peaceful species in the galaxy, famous for their medical advances and their absolute refusal to engage in violence. They looked like Earth deer that had evolved to walk upright with large, gentle eyes and soft brown fur. Their ships carried no weapons. Their colonies had no military, and they spent their time healing anyone who asked for help. Regardless of species, they were also the kind of aliens that most species thought were weak and foolish for their pacifism. "Ma'am," Martinez called out, "I'm detecting multiple transmission attempts on the same frequency over the past 4 days. It looks like they sent distress calls to everyone in range. Any responses?" Chen asked, though she suspected she knew the answer. Martinez checked his readings and shook his head. "Nothing, Captain. We're the first to respond." Chen was not surprised. Most species in the galaxy viewed humans as dangerous primitives from a death world. Earth was considered one of the most hostile planets ever discovered, and humans were seen as violent savages who solved every problem with warfare. The fact that humanity had only been part of galactic civilization for 50 years did not help their reputation. Other species called them Deathworlders behind their backs, and few wanted anything to do with them unless absolutely necessary. The Kythera sending a distress call to humans meant they were truly desperate. "Torres, get me a full tactical readout on Vrkari capabilities," Chen ordered. "Martinez, send a message to command. Tell them we're responding to a Kythera distress call and may be engaging Vrkari forces." Torres pulled up the files on his datapad. "Vrkari are professional raiders, Captain. They specialize in capturing slaves for gladiatorial combat and forced labor. Their ships are heavily armed but not military grade. They prefer hit-and-run tactics against unarmed targets." Chen studied the information. The Vrkari were larger than humans with thick gray skin and multiple arms that made them formidable in close combat. They had built their entire culture around taking what they wanted from weaker species. Their raids on peaceful worlds were legendary throughout the Outer Rim. "What's their usual MO for ship captures?" Chen asked. "They board, subdue the crew, sort the prisoners by value, and transport them to slave markets in the outer dark," Torres replied. "Medical ships like the Healing Dawn would be especially valuable because of the advanced equipment and the Kythera's healing knowledge." Chen felt anger building in her chest. The Kythera were healers who helped anyone in need. The idea of them being enslaved by raiders made her stomach turn. "Captain," Martinez interrupted, "I'm getting another transmission on the same frequency." "Put it through." This time the voice was different, rougher, speaking in broken Standard Galactic with a harsh accent that the computer identified as Vrkari. "Attention, any ships receiving Kythera transmissions. This is War Alpha Thexmore of the Vrkari raiding fleet. The medical ship Healing Dawn is now under our control. We have taken 400 prisoners, including younglings that will make excellent arena fighters once properly trained. Any ship attempting rescue will be destroyed. These prey animals belong to us now." The transmission ended with what sounded like screaming in the background. Chen stood up from her chair, her hands clenched into fists. Around the bridge, her crew had gone silent. She could see the same anger in their faces that she felt burning in her chest. "Captain," Torres said quietly, "if the message is 3 days old, and the Vrkari are talking about training the children as fighters." Chen did not need him to finish. Everyone knew what Vrkari training methods involved. The raiders were not just slavers but sadists who enjoyed breaking their prisoners through torture and violence. "All hands, this is the captain," Chen announced over the ship's communication system. "We are responding to a Cathara distress call. Vrkari raiders have taken a medical ship with 400 civilians, including children. We are going in hot and fast. All departments prepare for combat operations." She turned to her navigation officer. "Helm, set course for those coordinates, maximum burn. I want us there in 16 hours. Aye, Captain." Course laid in. The Retribution's engines roared to life, pushing the ship far beyond normal cruising speed. Chen felt the vibration through the deck plates as her ship raced toward what she knew would be a fight. "Torres, start preparing boarding teams," she ordered. "Full combat loadout. If there are survivors, we'll need medical teams ready as well." "Captain," Martinez called out, "should I try to contact the Healing Dawn directly?" Chen considered this. "Negative. If the Vrkari are still aboard, we don't want to give away our approach. Radio silence until we arrive." She walked to the main tactical display and studied the star charts. The Kepler Nebula was a perfect place for raiders to operate. The gas clouds interfered with long-range sensors, making it easy to hide and difficult for rescue ships to find them quickly. But Chen had not gotten command of the Retribution by accepting defeat. Her ship was a heavy cruiser designed for combat against pirates and raiders. Her crew had fought in the bloodiest battles of the Centauri conflict and won. If there were any Cathara still alive on that medical ship, she was going to get them out. "Ma'am," Torres said, reading from his tactical display, "intelligence files say Vrkari usually operate with 3 to 5 ships per raiding group. We'll likely be outnumbered." Chen smiled grimly. "Good. I'd hate for this to be too easy." As the Retribution raced through space toward the coordinates, Chen found herself thinking about the Cathara. She had met a few during diplomatic functions, and they had seemed almost impossibly gentle. The idea of creatures like that being tortured by Vrkari raiders made her want to put her fist through the bulkhead. Most of the galaxy thought humans were primitive and violent. Maybe they were right about the violent part. But sometimes, Chen thought, violence was exactly what the situation called for. The stars streaked past as the Retribution pushed toward its destination, carrying 200 very angry humans toward what they expected to be a rescue mission. They had no idea they were already too late for a rescue. 16 hours later, the UES Retribution dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler Nebula. Captain Chen stood on the bridge watching the swirling purple and gold gas clouds on the main screen. Somewhere in that maze of cosmic dust and radiation was the Healing Dawn. "Sensors are limited in this soup," reported Ensign Park from the science station, "but I'm picking up metallic signatures about 4 million kilometers toward the nebula's center." "Take us in, slow and quiet," Chen ordered. "I want to see what we're dealing with before they know we're here." The Retribution crept through the nebula's outer edges, its sensors straining to penetrate the interference. After an hour of careful navigation, they found what they were looking for. The Healing Dawn hung in space like a wounded animal. The large medical ship's white hull was scorched black in several places from weapon impacts. Debris floated around it in a slow, expanding cloud. But the ship was intact and life support appeared to be functioning. "I'm reading life signs aboard the target vessel," Park announced. "Both Cathara and Vrkari biosignatures." Chen studied the tactical display. 3 Vrkari raiders were docked to the medical ship like parasites feeding on a host. They were smaller than the Retribution but heavily armed for their size. "Captain," Torres said quietly, "why are they still here?" Vrkari usually grab what they want and run. Chen had been wondering the same thing. Vrkari were hit-and-run specialists. They should have taken their prisoners and left days ago. The fact that they were still attached to the Healing Dawn suggested something else was happening. "Unknown contacts," Park suddenly called out. 4 ships breaking orbit around the gas giant. More Vrkari raiders appeared on the tactical display, moving to surround the Retribution. Chen counted 7 enemy ships total, all armed and moving into attack formation. "Red alert," Chen announced. "All hands to battle stations." The bridge lights shifted to red as klaxons sounded throughout the ship. Chen's crew moved with practiced efficiency, preparing for combat. "Captain," Martinez reported from communications, receiving a transmission from the lead Vrkari ship. Put it through. The main screen flickered to show a massive Vakari warrior with ceremonial scars covering his gray hide. Forearms gestured as he spoke in accented standard Galactic. Human vessel, I am War Alpha Thexmore. You will surrender immediately or be destroyed. Your species has no business in Vakari hunting grounds. Chen stepped forward, her voice cold and level. This is Captain Sarah Chen of the U.S. Retribution. You will release your prisoners and surrender for prosecution under Galactic law. Thexmore laughed, a harsh barking sound. Galactic law does not apply to prey animals, human. The Kithara belong to us now. We have been enjoying their company for the past 3 days. Perhaps you would like to see what we have done with them? The screen changed to show the interior of the Healing Dawn. Chen felt her blood freeze at what she saw. The medical ship's clean white corridors were splattered with blood. Kithara bodies lay scattered on the deck, some clearly dead, others moving weakly. But what made Chen's hands clench into fists were the sounds, the desperate crying of Kithara younglings somewhere out of camera view. As you can see, Thexmore continued, his voice filled with cruel pleasure. Your precious healers are not so gentle when properly motivated. We have learned much about Kithara anatomy over the past few days. Their healing abilities make them very resilient to instruction. The camera panned to show a makeshift arena that had been set up in what was once the ship's main medical bay. Kithara children, their fur matted with blood and dirt, huddled together in terror while Vakari guards watched them with hungry eyes. The younglings have been particularly entertaining, Thexmore said. They learn to fight much faster when their elders are used as motivation. Chen could hear her crew breathing heavily around her. She glanced at Torres and saw murder in his eyes. At the weapons station, Gunner's mate Williams had his finger hovering over the firing controls. You see, human, Thexmore continued. This is what happens to weak species in our galaxy. The strong take what they want from the weak. Your people should remember this lesson. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in deadly silence. Chen stared at the tactical display for a long moment, her mind processing what she had just seen. The Vakari had not just raided the medical ship, they had turned it into a torture chamber. They were not just taking slaves. They were deliberately causing suffering for their own entertainment. Captain, Torres said quietly, your orders. Chen looked around her bridge at the faces of her crew. These were veterans who had seen combat, who understood the harsh realities of war. But she could see the same cold fury in their eyes that she felt building in her own chest. Martinez, she said, her voice steady, send a message to command. Tell them we are engaging Vakari forces under Article 847 of the Colonial Defense Accords. Martinez looked up sharply. Article 847 was the no-quarter protocol, reserved for acts of genocide against non-combatants. It meant the Retribution would take no prisoners and accept no surrender. Aye, Captain, Martinez said, his fingers moving across his console. Williams, Chen continued, target the Vakari ships, not the medical vessel. We still have people to save aboard that ship. Targets locked, Captain. Torres, prepare boarding teams. Full combat gear. Anyone who wants to volunteer for prisoner rescue, put them on the list. Ma'am, Torres said, that's going to be everyone. Chen nodded grimly. Fine, rotate them in shifts. She walked to the center of the bridge and activated the ship-wide communication system. All hands, this is the captain. We have located the Healing Dawn. The Kithara aboard that ship have been tortured and murdered for the entertainment of Vakari raiders. Some may still be alive, including children. We are going to get them out. She paused, looking around the bridge at her crew. The Vakari think they are the strong preying on the weak. They think humans are just another prey species. They are about to learn how wrong they are. All departments commence combat operations. The Retribution's weapons powered up with a deep thrumming sound that resonated through the hull. On the tactical display, the 7 Vakari ships moved into attack formation. Confident in their numerical advantage, they had no idea what they were about to face. Fire, Chen ordered. The Retribution's main guns spoke, sending streams of coherent energy toward the Vakari formation. The lead raider's shields flared and collapsed under the assault, and the ship broke apart in a brilliant explosion. Direct hit, Williams reported. Target destroyed. The remaining Vakari ships scattered, returning fire with their own weapons. The Retribution's shields absorbed the impacts easily. The human ship was built for war, while the raiders were designed for attacking defenseless civilians. Take us in close, Chen ordered. I want boarding range with that medical ship. As the retribution closed with the healing dawn, Chen could see more details of the damage the Vrikari had inflicted. Sections of the hull had been deliberately breached and sealed again, as if the raiders had been experimenting with decompression torture. Boarding shuttles ready, Captain, Torres reported. Launch them. And Torres, I want every Vrikari on that ship dead. No exceptions. Understood, Captain. As the first boarding shuttle launched toward the medical ship, Chen watched another Vrikari raider explode under the Retribution's guns. But her mind was on the images Thexmore had shown her. The bleeding Kithra children, the bodies in the corridors, the casual cruelty of creatures who tortured innocents for fun. The galaxy thought humans were violent primitives. Maybe they were right about the violent part. But sometimes, Chen thought as she watched her Marines prepare to board the healing dawn, violence was exactly what evil deserved. Lieutenant Marcus Torres led the first boarding team through the airlock of the healing dawn. His squad of 12 Marines moved in perfect formation, their weapons ready and their faces grim behind their helmets. They had all seen the transmission from War Alpha Thexmore. They all knew what they would find aboard the medical ship. Nothing could have prepared them for the reality. The first corridor they entered was painted with blood. Kithara bodies lay where they had fallen, their gentle deer-like faces frozen in expressions of terror and pain. The air stank of death and fear. Contact left, Corporal Williams shouted, raising his rifle. 3 Vrikari guards rounded the corner, their multiple arms carrying various weapons. They were laughing about something until they saw the human Marines. Then their laughter died as Williams and his team opened fire. The Vrikari fell without getting off a single shot. Sweep and clear, Torres ordered. Check every room. If it's Vrikari, kill it. If it's Kithara, get them to safety. The Marines spread out through the ship's corridors. Torres had fought in 12 major battles during the Centauri conflict. But this felt different. This was not war between armies. This was extermination of monsters who tortured innocents for pleasure. In the ship's medical bay, Sergeant Maria Vasquez found what remained of the Kithara medical staff. They had been strapped to their own surgical tables and subjected to experiments using their own equipment. Most were dead, but a few still breathed weakly. Medic, Vasquez called. I need a corpsman here now. Hospital Corpsman 2nd Class Jennifer Walsh rushed to Vasquez's side. Walsh had trained in trauma medicine and thought she had seen everything during the war. The sight of the tortured Kithara made her want to vomit. Can you save them? Vasquez asked. Walsh checked the nearest Kithara, an elderly female whose large brown eyes tracked movement but who seemed unable to speak. Maybe, if we get them to a proper medical facility soon. Do it, Vasquez said. She activated her comm unit. Torres, we found survivors in medical. They need immediate evacuation. Copy that, Torres replied. We're still clearing the ship. Found a dozen more Vrikari holed up in engineering. In the ship's engineering section, combat engineer Kyle Morrison was having a very different kind of fight. The Vrikari had barricaded themselves behind the reactor controls, threatening to overload the power core if the humans did not withdraw. Morrison smiled grimly and pulled out his toolkit. If the Vrikari wanted to play with the ship's systems, he was happy to oblige them. 10 minutes later, the artificial gravity in the engineering section reversed itself. The Vrikari found themselves pinned to the ceiling while Morrison and his team walked in on magnetic boots and finished them off. Engineering secured, Morrison reported, and the reactor is stable. But the worst discovery came when Private Jackson found what the Vrikari called their entertainment center. The ship's main cargo bay had been converted into an arena. Improvised seats surrounded a fighting pit, where Kithara children had been forced to battle each other while Vrikari spectators cheered. The younglings who had survived were huddled in cages along the walls, their large eyes wide with terror. Torres, Jackson said over the comm, his voice shaking with rage. You need to see this. When Torres arrived at the cargo bay, he stood in the doorway for a long moment, taking in the scene. The makeshift arena, the cages full of terrified children, the bodies of Kithara younglings who had not survived the entertainment. Sir? Jackson asked. What are your orders? Torres looked at the surviving Kithara children. They could not have been more than 10 years old in human terms, their fur matted and dirty, their gentle faces marked by cuts and bruises. They shrank back when they saw the armed humans, clearly expecting more torture. Get them out of those cages, Torres said quietly, and find them something to eat and drink. He activated his comm unit to contact Captain Chen. Captain, we've secured the Healing Dawn. We have 43 Cathara survivors, including 18 children. But ma'am, you need to know what the Vrkari did here. Torres described what they had found: the torture chambers, the forced fighting, the deliberate cruelty inflicted on beings who had never harmed anyone. There was a long silence before Chen responded. Copy that, Lieutenant. Get the survivors back to our ship for medical treatment. And Torres. Yes, ma'am? I want every piece of evidence documented, everything. I want the galaxy to see what the Vrkari did here. As the Marines began evacuating the Cathara survivors, tech specialist Amanda Park was busy in the ship's communication center. She had hacked into the Vrkari computer systems and found something that made her blood run cold. Torres, she called out. You need to see this. Park had accessed the Vrkari communication logs. The torture sessions aboard the Healing Dawn had been broadcast live to other Vrkari fleets across the sector. Worse, the broadcasts included coordinates to 12 other locations where peaceful species maintained colonies or ships. They were using this as a recruitment tool, Park explained, showing other raiders how easy it is to capture and torture weak species. Look at these response messages. Torres read the intercepted communications. Vrkari fleets from across the Outer Rim were expressing interest in joining similar raids. They were planning to hit Alari medical stations, Quillen research vessels, and even more Cathara colonies. Get this information to the captain immediately, Torres ordered. On the bridge of the Retribution, Captain Chen reviewed Park's findings with growing fury. The raid on the Healing Dawn was not an isolated incident. It was the opening move in a campaign of systematic terrorism against peaceful species. Captain, Martinez reported, we're receiving another transmission from War Alpha Thexmore. Put him through. Thexmore appeared on the main screen, his scarred face twisted with rage. Behind him, Chen could see the bridge of his flagship, where other Vrkari warriors watched the proceedings. Human Captain, Thexmore snarled. You have interfered with Vrkari operations. You will pay for this insult. The only one paying for anything is you, Chen replied coldly. You tortured and murdered unarmed civilians, children. Thexmore laughed. They were prey animals. Weak creatures that exist only to serve the strong, just like your species will serve us once we break you. Is that a threat? It is a promise. We have been watching human space, studying your weaknesses. You think you are warriors, but you are just another prey species that has grown too bold. We will teach you your place. Chen stood up from her command chair. Around the bridge, her crew watched with cold eyes as their captain faced down the Vrkari leader. Let me explain something to you, Chen said, her voice deadly quiet. You just made the biggest mistake in your species' history. You tortured children. You murdered healers. You broadcasted to the galaxy like it was entertainment. She leaned forward, her dark eyes blazing. Humans protect those who cannot protect themselves. And we do not forgive. We do not forget. And we do not show mercy to monsters. Thexmore's expression shifted slightly. For the first time, he seemed to sense that perhaps he had misjudged the humans. Your threats do not frighten us, he said, but his voice lacked its earlier confidence. Good, Chen replied, because they weren't threats. They were a promise. She gestured to Williams at the weapons station. Fire all batteries. The Retribution's guns spoke as one, sending a devastating barrage toward Thexmore's flagship. The Vrkari vessel's shields collapsed instantly, and the ship's hull cracked open like an egg. But Chen was not done. She activated the ship-wide communication system, broadcasting on all frequencies. This is Captain Sarah Chen of the UES Retribution, to all Vrkari forces in this system. You have committed acts of genocide against non-combatant civilians. Under Article 847 of the Human Colonial Defense Accords, no quarter will be given. Surrender is not an option. You will be hunted down and destroyed. The remaining Vrkari ships tried to flee, but the Retribution was faster and more powerful. One by one, Chen's gunners picked them off with methodical precision. As the last raider exploded in a brilliant fireball, Chen turned to Torres, who had returned from the boarding operation. How are the survivors? She asked. Physically, they'll recover, Torres replied. Mentally, it's going to take time. The children especially, Chen nodded. Get them the best care we can provide. And Torres? Yes, ma'am? Start preparing a full report for command. Include everything. The evidence of torture, the broadcast logs, the planned raids on other peaceful species. I want this information distributed to every human fleet in the galaxy. Torres smiled grimly. Planning to share the news, Captain? Chen looked out at the debris field that had once been 7 Vrkari raiders. The Vrkari wanted to send a message to the galaxy about what happens to weak species. I think it's time we sent a message of our own. As the Retribution set course for the nearest human medical facility with its cargo of rescued Kythera, Chen began composing her report to Admiral Hassan at 5th Fleet Command. The Vrkari had made a critical error. They had mistaken human restraint for weakness. They were about to learn the difference. Admiral Rebecca Hassan stood in the war room of the 5th Fleet Command Station, staring at the holographic display that showed the tactical situation across 3 sectors. The report from Captain Chen had arrived 6 hours ago, and Hassan had spent that time reading every horrific detail of what the Vrkari had done to the Kythera aboard the Healing Dawn. She was not alone in the room. Fleet captains, intelligence officers, and marine commanders filled the space, all of them studying the same data. The silence was heavy and dangerous. How many Vrkari fleets are we tracking? Hassan asked. Commander Price, her intelligence chief, highlighted sections of the display. 14 confirmed raiding groups operating in this region. Based on the communication intercepts from the Healing Dawn, at least 7 of them are actively planning attacks on civilian targets. Hassan studied the positions. Vrkari raiders were scattered across 50 light-years of space, hitting isolated colonies and ships belonging to species that had no military protection. The Alari, the Quillan, the peaceful Mathani traders, all of them were targets. Ma'am, Captain Rodriguez of the cruiser Vengeance spoke up. My ship is closest to the Alari medical station at Kepler 442. If the Vrkari hit that facility, 3,000 civilian medical personnel, Hassan finished. Including Alari younglings in the pediatric wing. The room fell silent again. Everyone had read Chen's report. Everyone had seen the evidence of what the Vrkari did to children. Hassan activated the fleet communication system. All ships, all stations, this is Admiral Hassan. I am implementing Operation Righteous Fury, effective immediately. All vessels within 50 parsecs are to begin hunter-killer operations against Vrkari raiding fleets. Rules of engagement are Article 847. No quarter, no prisoners, no mercy. She looked around the room at her officers. The Vrkari think peaceful species are prey animals. They think the strong should prey on the weak. It's time we taught them what real strength looks like. The response was immediate. Across human space, ships changed course and began converging on known Vrkari positions. The heavy cruiser Retribution was joined by the destroyers Wolfpack and Storm, Crow. The battleship Indomitable altered course toward the outer dark where Vrkari slave markets operated, but the human response went beyond just military action. On the diplomatic station New Geneva, Ambassador David Kim was meeting with representatives from a dozen different species. The Galactic Council had called an emergency session to discuss the human military buildup in the Outer Rim. Ambassador Kim, said Councillor Vextar of the Hegemony, human fleets are mobilizing across 3 sectors. This level of military activity threatens the peace of the galaxy. Kim stood up at his place in the circular chamber. He was a small man compared to most of the aliens around him, but his voice carried clearly in the vast space. With respect, Counselor, human fleets are responding to acts of genocide committed against unarmed civilians. We have evidence that Vrkari raiders tortured and murdered Kythera medical personnel, including children. The Vrkari are a known problem, admitted Counselor Litha Ara of the Alari Confederation, but this level of human military response seems excessive. Kim activated a holographic projector in the center of the chamber. The images from the Healing Dawn appeared. The torture chambers, the makeshift arena, the cages full of terrified Kythera children. The chamber fell completely silent. Several of the alien representatives made sounds of distress or horror. This is what the Vrkari call entertainment, Kim said quietly. They broadcast these torture sessions to recruit other raiders. They were planning similar attacks on Alari medical stations, Quillan research vessels, and other civilian targets. Counselor Threndi of the Ancient Ethereal Collective spoke for the first time in the session. The humans seek to impose their will through violence. No, Kim replied. We seek to protect those who cannot protect themselves. The Vrkari had 3 days to show mercy to their prisoners. They chose torture instead. Now they will face the consequences. Elder Lithara of the Kythera delegation stood up slowly. She was one of the survivors from the Healing Dawn, her normally pristine fur still showing patches where medical sensors had been attached during her recovery. "May I speak?" she asked. The chamber fell silent. The Kythera were respected throughout the galaxy for their wisdom and healing abilities. When one of them spoke at the council, others listened. "For 3 days I watched my people suffer and die," Lithara said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "I watched Vakari guards force our younglings to fight each other while they cheered. I saw healers who had dedicated their lives to saving others tortured with their own medical equipment." She looked around the chamber at the assembled representatives. "We called for help. We sent distress signals to every species in range. Do you know who answered? No one. For 3 days no one came. The chamber remained silent. Then the humans arrived. I expected soldiers seeking glory, warriors looking for a fight. Instead, I found protectors who wept with rage when they saw what had been done to our children. They carried our wounded with gentle hands while planning systematic retribution against our torturers." Lithara's large brown eyes fixed on each counselor in turn. "The humans are not imposing their will through violence. They are imposing justice through strength. There is a difference, and it is a difference that matters." She sat down, leaving the chamber in contemplative silence. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, other species were taking notice of the human response. On the Corvan Empire's border worlds, Fleet Commander Gorthak watched human ships moving with unprecedented coordination. The Corvans had been planning to test human defenses along the neutral zone, but the sight of an entire battle group changing course in perfect formation made him reconsider. "Sir," his aide reported, "human military traffic has increased by 300% in the last 12 hours. They're moving assets from every sector." Gorthak studied the tactical displays. The humans were not just responding to the Vakari threat. They were demonstrating a level of military coordination that the Corvan Empire had not expected. "Cancel the border probe," Gorthak ordered. "I want to see how this situation develops." In the shadowy regions of the Outer Dark, other predatory species were also watching. The Mordaki flesh traders, who specialized in selling exotic aliens to wealthy collectors, quietly shut down their operations in sectors where human patrols had been detected. The Sleth experimentation cartels, who captured sentience for illegal medical research, began withdrawing from trade routes that might attract human attention. Word was spreading through the galactic underworld. Humans were hunting Vakari with systematic efficiency, and they were not taking prisoners. Back on New Geneva, Ambassador Kim was fielding questions from nervous counselors. "How long will this human military operation continue?" asked Counselor Vextar. "Until every Vakari raider involved in attacks on civilians has been eliminated," Kim replied. "And what of Vakari civilians? Their colonies and trade ships?" Kim's expression softened slightly. "Humans do not make war on innocents. Vakari civilians who are not involved in raiding will not be harmed, but any Vakari found enslaving, torturing, or murdering non-combatants will be destroyed. This sets a dangerous precedent," warned Counselor Threndy. "What happens when humans decide another species threatens their interests?" Elder Lithara stood up again. "May I answer that?" Kim nodded. "I have spent the last week in human medical facilities," Lithara said. "I have watched human doctors work around the clock to save my people. I have seen human nurses holding our traumatized children while they cry for their murdered parents. I have witnessed human therapists developing new treatments for trauma using techniques my people never imagined." She paused, looking around the chamber. "The same species that is hunting Vakari raiders with ruthless efficiency is also healing our wounded with extraordinary gentleness. They are not bloodthirsty savages. They are guardians who understand when violence is necessary and when mercy is appropriate." The debate continued for hours, but the outcome was clear. The Galactic Council would not interfere with human operations against the Vakari. Too many species had been victims of raider attacks, and too few had been willing to do anything about it. As the session ended, Kim received a priority message from Admiral Hassan. The first phase of Operation Righteous Fury had begun. 3 Vakari raiding fleets had been located and engaged. 2 had been completely destroyed. The third was fleeing toward the galactic rim with human ships in pursuit. But more importantly, human forces had rescued over 800 enslaved beings from Vakari slave ships. The rescued aliens were being transported to human medical facilities for treatment and recovery. Kim smiled as he read the report. The galaxy was watching to see what humans would do with their newfound reputation as protectors. The answer was simple. They would do whatever it took to ensure that monsters like the Vrkari could never again torture innocents for entertainment. The word was spreading across the galaxy. Humanity had announced its presence as a force for justice, and the predators were beginning to understand that the age of easy prey was coming to an end. 6 months after the rescue of the Healing Dawn, Admiral Sarah Chen stood before the Galactic Council in the Great Chamber on New Geneva. The woman who had been a ship captain during the Vrkari crisis now wore the stars of a fleet admiral, and the entire galaxy knew her name. The chamber was packed. Representatives from every major species had come to hear what the humans would say about their campaign against the Vrkari raiders. The galaxy had watched in amazement as human forces systematically hunted down and eliminated every Vrkari raiding fleet in known space. The Vrkari Confederacy, as an organized military force, no longer existed. Honored counselors, Chen began, her voice carrying clearly through the vast chamber. 6 months ago, the UES Retribution responded to a distress call from the medical vessel Healing Dawn. What we found there changed everything. Behind her, a holographic display showed images from that day. The rescued Kithara children, the evidence of torture, the systematic cruelty that had shocked the galaxy. Even now, many counselors looked away from the worst images. We learned that the raid on the Healing Dawn was not an isolated incident, Chen continued. It was part of a coordinated campaign of terrorism against peaceful species. The Vrkari were not just taking slaves, they were torturing innocents for entertainment and broadcasting it as recruitment propaganda. She gestured to the tactical display that replaced the images. Human forces identified and eliminated 47 Vrkari raiding fleets across 12 sectors. We destroyed 63 slave markets and freed over 12,000 enslaved beings from 37 different species. The numbers were staggering. In 6 months, humanity had completely dismantled the largest piracy network in the Outer Rim. But Operation Righteous Fury was not just about hunting raiders, Chen said. It was about establishing a principle that the galaxy seems to have forgotten, that the strong have a responsibility to protect the weak. Counselor Vextar of the Hegemony raised his hand. Admiral Chen, while the Council appreciates human efforts to combat piracy, your methods have been unusually aggressive. 47 entire fleets destroyed with no survivors? Chen's expression remained calm. Counselor, the Vrkari were given every opportunity to surrender their prisoners and face justice through proper legal channels. Instead, they chose to continue their attacks on civilian targets. When the Mordaki flesh traders attacked an Alari hospital ship 2 months ago, they killed 63 patients who were unable to be moved to safety. When the Sleth cartel raided a Quillen research station, they murdered every scientist they found and took their apprentices for experimentation. She paused, looking around the chamber. These were not warriors fighting for territory or resources. These were monsters who tortured innocents for profit and pleasure. The galaxy had 300 years to deal with this problem through diplomacy and legal action. The result was 12,000 enslaved beings and countless dead civilians. Elder Lithara of the Kithara stood up in the gallery reserved for observers. She had been attending every council session since her recovery, serving as an unofficial ambassador for the surviving victims of Vrkari brutality. "May I speak, Admiral?" she asked. Chen nodded. "Of course, Elder." Lithara walked to the center of the chamber, moving slowly on legs that still bore scars from her torture. When she spoke, her voice carried the authority of someone who had survived the worst that the galaxy had to offer. 6 months ago, I watched Vrkari guards force Kithara children to fight each other while they cheered and placed bets. I saw healers who had dedicated their lives to saving others tortured with their own medical equipment. I listened to War Alpha Thexmore explain that this was the natural order of things, that the strong should prey on the weak. The chamber was completely silent. Today, those same Kithara children are recovering in human medical facilities. They are receiving therapy from human doctors who have developed new treatments for trauma. They are learning to trust again, because humans showed them that there are beings in this galaxy who will fight to protect the innocent. She turned to face the assembled. Counselors, the humans did not just eliminate a threat, They fundamentally changed what it means to be a predator species in civilized space. Before Admiral Chen's campaign, raiders and slavers operated with impunity because they knew peaceful species could not fight back and military species would not intervene. Now they know that humans will intervene, and humans do not show mercy to those who torture children. Counselor Threndy of the Ethereal Collective spoke in his ancient, measured voice. The concern remains that humans have set themselves up as judges and executioners for the galaxy. What happens when they decide another species threatens their interests? Chen stepped forward. Counselor, let me be very clear about human policy. We have no interest in conquering territory or imposing our government on other species. We have no desire to build an empire or collect tribute. We want one thing: a galaxy where civilians can travel safely without fear of being enslaved or tortured. She activated a new display showing human patrol routes across the Outer Rim. Human fleets now patrol sectors that were once hunting grounds for raiders and slavers. We respond to distress calls from any species that requests assistance. We ask for nothing in return except that governments treat their own people with basic dignity. And if they refuse? Asked Counselor Vextar. Chen's smile was cold. Then they become pirates in our estimation and we treat them accordingly. The message was clear. The galaxy had a new sheriff and the rules had changed. Ambassador Kim stood up from the human delegation. The Council has received formal requests for human protection from 17 species over the past 6 months. We have accepted all of them. Human naval bases are being established in the Alari Confederation, the Quillen Collective, and the Mathani trade routes. We are not conquering these regions. We are protecting them at their own request. The transformation was remarkable. Species that had been easy targets for raiders now had an option: request human protection. The price was simple: treat your own people and others with basic dignity. But the most powerful testament to the new order came from an unexpected source. Fleet Commander Gorthak of the Corvan Empire requested permission to address the Council. The Corvans were aggressive expansionists who had been testing the borders of peaceful species for decades. Honored counselors, Gorthak said, his scarred face grim. The Corvan Empire wishes to formally renounce any territorial claims in sectors currently under human protection. The chamber erupted in surprised murmurs. The Corvans backing down from anything was unprecedented. Furthermore, Gorthak continued, the Empire wishes to establish formal diplomatic relations with the human colonial authority. We believe cooperation would be more beneficial than confrontation. Chen nodded respectfully. The human colonial authority welcomes diplomatic contact with any species committed to peaceful resolution of disputes. As the session continued, the scope of the change became clear. The hegemony announced new policies protecting civilian ships in their territory. The Ethereal Collective offered to share intelligence on remaining pirate activities. Even species that had traditionally avoided contact with humans were quietly opening diplomatic channels. Later, as the session ended, Chen walked through the corridors of the diplomatic station with Elder Lithara. The old Cathara moved slowly but steadily, her recovery a testament to both her people's natural healing abilities and human medical care. How are the children doing? Chen asked. Better each day, Lithara replied. Your Dr. Walsh has worked miracles with them. They are beginning to play again, to laugh. Some have even asked if they can visit human ships to thank the Marines who rescued them. Chen smiled. I think that can be arranged. They passed a large viewport that showed ships moving through the space around New Geneva. Among the diplomatic vessels and trade ships, Chen could see the distinctive hull of a human cruiser, the UES Guardian, providing security for the station. Admiral, Lithara said quietly, may I ask you something? Of course. Before your people rescued us, I believed that violence was always wrong, that there was always a peaceful solution to any conflict. The Vrkari taught me otherwise, but watching your people over these past months has taught me something else. Chen waited for her to continue. Violence is not always wrong when it protects the innocent. The question is not whether force should ever be used, but whether it is used by those who understand the difference between justice and cruelty. They stopped at another viewport, this one showing the restored Healing Dawn in the distance. The medical ship had been completely rebuilt and renamed Second Chance. It now served as a mobile hospital staffed jointly by Cathara healers and human trauma specialists. The galaxy is different now, Lithara observed. Safer. For the innocent, Chen agreed. For those who prey on the innocent, it's become a very dangerous place. As they watched, a human patrol ship moved past the viewport, its hull bearing the insignia of the Human Colonial Protection Service. The sight of that ship would send raiders and slavers fleeing to whatever dark corners of space remained beyond human reach. And in those dark corners, the predators whispered warnings to each other about the Deathworlders who had decided that some lines should never be crossed.